Welcome to Jungle, the definitive podcast for junglists looking to dig deeper behind the scenes. Brought to you by Community Insiders, the show documents the sonic evolution of the genre, looking back to its past, decoding the present, and predicting the future. I'm your host, Tormund, and today we are speaking with architecture. So glad to have you with us here today. It's an honor to have you. I appreciate everything you do in the scene and online for education of the gear that you have and the channel that you have. The This Old DAW series you do on YouTube is a lot of fun for me. I really enjoy that one. For myself, I started production in 2006 is when I say I really started. I was a teenager. And I had a copy of Ableton Live 5 and an interface and like a Mackie mixer. But before that, I was messing around with Acid Lab and some of the older softwares DAWs that you explore in your videos are familiar to me from when I was trying to scour magazines and websites and an early YouTube for how to find more production secrets and tools. So, when did you start to get involved in production? And was it with Jungle right away, or was that something that you got into once you'd already had an established music background? Or it's a little bit of your story.
That's a good question. Like when I got into music production, like Jungle was something I was kind of like adjacent to for the longest time, and like I knew about it. But geographically, where I was in the United States, it just kind of it wasn't really something that a lot of people I knew like really listened to. And so what actually got me into production originally was producing hip hop back in around 99 to 2000, which kind of have a similar story as you. I was using like Sonic Foundry. Acid Music was the first program I started with. And this is about the year 2000 or so. And the way I actually got into that was by accident because I broke my dad's CD burner with a paper label that I attached to a CD, and I was like all excited to put this graphic design on my CD into the CD burner, and of course I broke the CD burner shortly after that, and to my dad's dismay. But where this leads to is the fact that I then bought this. It was an HP CD write that came with a copy of Sonic Foundry Acid. And that's really what kind of kickstarted my exploration into digital audio workstations, arranging with loops. And basically, I was just working with the very limited selection of sounds I had at that time and using them like repeatedly. And from there, I basically kind of started growing from there. And about a few years later after that was like, well, now I want to start using my own sounds. Like, how do I get into that? And basically, it was just kind of a slow progression from there. Adding to the setup and just growing it from there.
Wow, that's a great origin story with the oops, I broke my dad's CD drive and now I'm a producer. Step 3, profit.
Pretty much.
So, you said you're here in the States and I am too. And so I relate to there being less of a culture with jungle, or at least a harder culture to tap into. So for you, in your experience, around what time in the progress of the scene were you first getting started with that sound and tapping into that with your own production?
I think for me, what really got me into jungle this time around was actually it was about 2020 when Pete Cannon's Sound on Sound video came out, just kind of talking about how he makes jungle. And I've had a lot of this jungle gear for a long duration of my career. Like I bought my S1000 in the 2000s. Same goes for my S950 and all those other samplers. I had the samplers well before I was really seriously producing jungle. And I'd actually say I was more of a listener of like early hardcore, like Prodigy, T99, and that era of music before I was really more into jungle. It's like I was listening to everything that was around jungle, but not actually jungle because I just didn't know where to start with it.
I can relate to that. I was also a huge Prodigy fan and like Chemical Brothers and Crystal Method and sort of that big beat sound, rave sound. But that would also slip over to some like happy hardcore at the time too, and those were all things that I fantasized in my mind of, oh, that's what like raves are like, and that'd be so cool to go to a rave. But of course, growing up where I grew up, there was no raves going on. So it wasn't until I was older that I got into some of that scene. But yeah, it's very like influential between those genres. Um, so were you making music in that style, more like the Prodigy, or were you focused mostly on hip hop before starting Jungle?
Hip hop was kind of like something I started with initially and quickly expanded from there. I would say, um, it's kind of hard to describe what my style was early. I was just kind of experimenting. Really, I really was
Yeah.
like, I was just like, what can we do with what we have, and just kind of like, I would say it was a little more freeform at that time. I would say early 2000s were more like I was exploring like ambient stuff, and then once I got into hardware, which was about the end of 2004. I was really listening to a lot of like early Warp record stuff. So like Aphex Twin, Artiker, B12. That was kind
Oh,
of like
yeah.
my big influences of that time. And that's kind of like, I was basically trying to figure out how do I recreate like Saw 85 to 92 was basically like my mindset at the time.
Do you still find that that's something that influences your work now, that sound, or do you feel like you've sort of expanded upon that, learned from it, and now you're trying something different?
It definitely dictated the 4 track tape recorder pathway I took during that time because it was just at a time where it was like I didn't really have the money for a better computer at the time, but the hardware was actually cheaper than a new computer at this moment. And so that's actually the reason why I went that direction is because at that time it was cheaper for me to buy a 4 track recorder, a couple of like analog synths, some electribes, and that's kind of was the basis of starting my hardware studio. Was just like for $500 I can build like a starter studio versus like spending a couple thousand on a computer, which it's all completely kind of inverted now. Where it's like, well,
Yeah.
can I really say that now? Because it's like Behringer now has like these affordable
True.
options, so
Yeah.
it kind of it comes in waves where like one's more affordable than the other, and then you have new manufacturers making it affordable again. So it's just kind of goes in cycles.
Yeah, and there are new things that push the technology to make it cheaper or more expensive and following demand and second markets, and it's definitely always fluctuating, but it is interesting that you started at a time where it is somewhat the inverse of how it's been for quite a few years now, where the more accessible route is through getting a cheap laptop and cheap software versus more expensive hardware.
And just to put it in perspective, like it was cheaper to buy like a couple of Kai samplers versus Contact, and then the machine to run Contact.
Wow, that is that is quite that is different than what we would suggest to someone today if they only had a couple dollars in their pocket.
No, exactly. It's completely changed.
Do you have a favorite piece of gear that you're using that in your studio that you've had for a long time, or maybe it's a new piece that's really inspired you? What's got some sentimental value to you?
That's a great question. I mean, that one I could probably spend the most of time speaking on because it's like, I mean, there's a lot of things that are kind of like from the same time period. Like I kind of like decided I'm gonna curate like a studio that like is from like '99 essentially. That's kind of like the route I go because it's like, well, that's kind of like as far as I want to like progress sonically, as far as like sticking with the period of like this is like the peak of what this era offered, and that's essentially what I did. Was I just was like, what was the best technology of that time, and basically like. The Akai S1000, 3000s were basically standards. They weren't like the cutting edge at that time, but they were like the most ubiquitous, and especially for jungle, that they were kind of like the standard of that sound. And then you have like the emu samplers, which kind of evolved into like the Ed Rush optical style drum and bass, like Virus Records and all that stuff, and Photech, of course. And so like I view both of those machines as kind of like their own thing sonically. Like the Akai, of course, has like the classic like breakbeat effect on when you drive the analog inputs with a break. It kind of has that signature sound. The emus, the earlier versions have that. The later ones, not so much. But the thing that the emus offer, they just offer a much more sophisticated synthesis engine where you can take those
Mhm.
samples and just kind of affect the sound in ways that you just couldn't even think of on an Akai sampler, except for maybe the S5000, 6000.
Man, this is fascinating. I don't have any of this hardware myself, but I'm aware of it, and I know of the sounds, the sound profile that they each have. But it's really awesome to hear someone speak with like hands-on experience about the differences they find in these pieces of classic hardware that help develop genres that I love. So, I mean, if you've got more on that perspective, I'd love to hear it.
No, for sure. And we're just talking about one aspect right now, which is just the samplers. And um,
Yeah.
the I would say like I'm working on trying to get my mojo with the S950 where I want it. I've come a long way with it in a short period of time, and it's very different from the other samplers because it has a more rudimentary version of program handling. You basically have one program, and then you have multiple key groups into one program, whereas the newer versions, starting with the S1000, allow you to run multiple programs with their own key groups. It's a lot easier to organize and clean
Oh.
up. And with the S950, you kind of have to be like, okay, I want program this MIDI channel is going to be this set of sounds, and then keep in mind you also have only 8 note polyphony to work with on an S950. So if you're trying to squeeze a whole sound out of that S950, you really have to think about like, okay, what do I want in this song before I even start? I got to have a bass, I got to have a break, a couple time stretch sections, maybe a vocal sample, pad. And so you just have to kind of like um, methodically approach how you're going to even start the track before you even start the track. Whereas the S1000, 3000, you're a little more flexible because it's like, if you don't like a break, well, you just delete that program, start a new program, and just get
Mm.
right back to it. The S950, it's like, well, now I got to move sounds around and like make things work. Now that I've decided I'm going to change this. And so that's what I would say makes the S950 harder out of actually any of the other samplers.
That's a great perspective because it really does kind of put you in the mindset of what some of these early producers developing the jungle sound were considering, um, and sort of what influenced the layout of a track in the macro sense, rather than just the groove in the what's going on at the moment. Do you have a particular producer that you go to for inspiration, or that you're like, I really like what they did with this sound or this piece of gear and I want to try and do some of that? Or are you pulling little bits from everywhere, or sort of what's your tonal palette come from?
I say one of the big benefits right now of this jungle revival that we've seen is that we have a lot of people who are kind of trying to bring back this style kind of simultaneously beyond just myself. And
Hmm.
there's a whole community out there called Mad Labs that's been a really great source of like getting ideas of like how to leverage this stuff in a way that I would have had no way of like figuring out before. And basically like guys like Galleon and IJO are some of my more favorite recent producers. And of course like Thought Forms, 4 a.m. Breaks. And there's so
Right.
many new producers kind of taking on this classic sound. That's kind of where I've kind of focused because it's like these are people I can talk to like today about what they're doing. It's a little harder when you're going back to the 90s and trying to like establish those relationships. I mean, Busy Bee has a good channel on that too. So he's kind of like one of the pioneers of the time, kind of now recently talking about it. And I think
Hmm.
that's what I think is one of the cool things about now is that we're able to like better share this information versus like trying to like go to a forum post from
Yeah.
15 plus years ago and hope that you have deciphered exactly what this person's trying to tell you because that's the way I was trying to learn almost 15, 20 years ago some of this stuff and it was just like wait what like I don't understand what you're talking about, I can't see what you're showing me.
Yeah, yeah, they're just using their own shorthand or what their friend told them or their understanding of it, and it kinda gets lost in translation sometimes. I remember that myself in my early days.
Yeah, that dissemination of information just wasn't as like seamless as it is now, where you can just like show the workflow, show exactly how you do it, because a picture while you're describing it is just worth so much more than a
Yeah,
really lengthy or like I mean, a lengthy forum post would be great, but that's usually not how it was. It was like a blurb from Dogs on Acid, like, okay, I did this on this sampler. I just found the crossfade on the loop at this point, and it's just like, well, what does that mean? Like, how do I replicate what you just did
right.
there? Like, I don't understand the full context. And I think being able to show the full context now is the benefit that we have with these technologies now.
Yeah, I think something that's really cool is with at least our scene in the music is no one's secretive about what they're doing. No one's saying like, "Oh, this is my secret special sauce technique." Everyone's like, "Hey, I did this new thing. Check it out. You can do it too." And I think that's helping push everyone further. And at times, I do think it can make a lot of the music oversaturated with a certain sound at times. But much like the demand of hardware prices versus software prices, we see someone else saying, "Hey, that's really oversaturated. Here's something totally different." And that becomes a new style. So, it's always evolving. Um, what have some of your favorite moments or eras of sound design been in your history of production?
As far as sound design goes, I definitely would say like the late 90s, early 2000s were the most impactful for me. I mean, that's just kind of like that was when I was really like taking it all in. This was like when it was all fresh and new, and like I was just like blown away by like the sounds of that time. And yeah, as far as like sound design goes, like I think there's been so much that happened in the 90s that we're still trying to figure out what
Hmm.
happened. For example, like I mean, this kind of goes slightly off jungle into like from a sound design perspective where I take a lot of influence from is the early 90s Nine Inch Nails sound of like turbo synth and like all the digidesign stuff that he used for that sound was like
Right.
one of my earliest like, oh my god, how did he create this album? Like, and I'm still saying that to that day. And I've actually exchanged a few messages with Charlie Clouser on that note about like, what did you guys do to like create this sound? It's just like I've been listening to this album for over 30 years, and it just still blows me away every time I listen to it. Like knowing like what they were using, how they used it. It's just like it was so new, and everyone was just kind of exploring the possibilities of this stuff. There wasn't really a standard yet, and I think it's good to have like a standard of like doing things, but
Right.
it just led to so much innovation at that time that we're just kind of like there's still things that really haven't been done that way since because now there's standards and everyone's kind of like in an industry standard like methodology. And so I think that
Yeah.
non-standardization is kind of what led to a lot of like these innovative ideas and implementations.
Yeah, I see what you mean where sort of that like Wild West period of any new technology that comes out or new sort of technique that comes out, we see that period of, no rules and just sort of wild experimentation to see things that sound cool or how they can be applied to sounds that already exist. So it may be sort of like that industrial rock sound, or it could be jungle, or it could be ambient, uh, or IDM like Aphex Twin. So I mean, all of these elements, it does create such a cradle of growth for new sounds. So you're right. That is a very cool period of time. I like to pull from myself as well. In my opinion, I try to, when I make jungle as Tormund, try to push outside of just sounding like another LTJ record. I like to include more rave elements or things that I haven't heard before myself to make it sound fresh to my own ears. But for you, when you're limited to a degree by the gear that you're using, how do you find yourself expanding into new sounds?
Well, that's kind of a good point too. It's like I was you kind of touched on the subject I was just kind of thinking about, like where you're wanting to do your own take on jungle, and like I think like you said, like I'm not looking to sound like an LTJ Bucum album. Like every other production either. And if anything, I'm trying to like change that a bit myself. And that's actually why I've been taking a break and like kind of focusing on like my piano fundamentals and like been taking classes on that, like just to get my own technique up.
Mhm.
Is that I kind of feel like I was hitting a limit with what I knew, and I need to expand what I know. And that's why I'm like taking like formal like piano lessons right now, just to kind of like improve my technique, improve my live playing ability, just so I
Yeah.
can like just do other things besides what I've been doing and just get some new ideas doing other things. And if I was to say like what's the direction I want to take sonically, I would probably say like I would like to take the jungle aesthetic and like mix it with like Massive Attack's mezzanine era sound. Is and I
Oh,
have played
awesome.
a lot with that in my earlier productions in the
Mhm.
last couple of years, but not like I would actually say like I've honestly been playing with the thought of like just making a full on trip hop album, which from what I'm seeing now is trip hop's kind of having its own resurgence right now.
Yeah, it is.
But I think jungle and trip hop are very compatible because all you have to do is 2x the speed of your break, and you're basically back in jungle. You go half speed, you're in trip hop territory, and
Yeah.
that's actually how I've been mixing my trip hop and jungle aesthetics. It's just kind of like having those moments where you have the fast portion, the slow portion, and just kind of like mixing that up.
I look forward to hearing what you come up with on that, and how your new musical abilities that you're developing will establish that sound for you. Are you hoping to collaborate with anyone in the future, or actually, let me walk that back. How difficult is collaboration for you with such a vintage hardware setup?
It's really not that difficult, and I've worked really hard to make it not difficult because I have most of the modern DAWs in my setup already. I have Ableton Live 12. I have a full on way to integrate both the vintage and the modern simultaneously in my setup. So like I have the ability where I can run everything on my vintage Pro Tools setup and my modern Mac, and I can send back and forth 64 channels of audio to and from each setup with like no issues. It's kind of like I would say like what do I focus on the most in this setup is like where are my bottlenecks and how do I ease this bottleneck in my setup. And that's really like why I have so many different like machines in my setup. It looks like a lot because it is a lot because I I'm still trying to find like the most efficient way to execute what I want to do with some of this vintage stuff. It's and while it's like yeah it's just there's so many ways to approach things, and I would say like the one where I am the most challenged on is still the S950, just because it's like you have only so much RAM, so many voices to work with. You really have to get creative in your economization of every sample that goes into it. Like I have a program where I just dump that sound from the S950 into my really old Mac, which is the Quattro 700. I use a program called Antares Infinity that finds like the exact loop points I need to like make a seamless loop of that sound. So I can really truncate it really far down. Like if I just like really want to economize my RAM, for example, like I can
Mhm.
just take that portion, get a nice seamless loop out of it, send it back to the machine, and then I can just kind of play that sound without having this super like 1 to 2 bar length pad. I can make that much shorter with that program and save room for other sounds.
Wow, that is so much deeper than I would have known on the surface level. Shifting across different machines and softwares to send it back. And I understand the principle. I just don't know the technical details of working with that gear. And that's really, really cool to hear about. So, if anyone listening also enjoys the technicality of this conversation, please check out Architecture's channel on YouTube, which is full of videos breaking down these pieces of gear, these concepts, and also has his incredible music that he makes on this gear. So I'm going to transition this right now to our rewind portion.
I think Lemon D's I think it's This Is LA is a really big influence to me because it was kind of like that pairing of like West Coast G funk
Yeah.
gangster rap with jungle is another inspiration I take very heavily on because I do have a MIDI Moog Model D that I like to incorporate in my jungle productions just for that purpose all by itself. And so it's like I really take a lot of inspiration from Death Row Records. It's just from the place where I grew up, which was like Phoenix, Arizona. That was like the big sound. We're
Right.
not that far from California, and so that was kind of the sound of my youth. And it's like there was a documentary saying that like jungle is basically kind of like there's a basis, a uniform basis, like basically the breaks and the aesthetics, but also being able to bring in like your own cultural influences and putting it into the mix. And that's kind of like the way I've taken that inspiration is I've taken my own. I wasn't in UK learning about second wave hip hop in UK necessarily. I was more influenced by what Beastie Boys did with Paul's Boutique and Death
Mhm.
Row Records and like NWA and stuff like that. Those were my more immediate inspirations for my hip hop sound. And basically, like when you learn that in the UK, like second wave hip hop was the sound source of a lot of these breaks in jungle. This was
Right.
kind of like the more American take on my inspiration of it.
Very cool. Yeah, that touches on something that I like to read about as a historian for electronic music and rave music, where I've heard before the analogy that we had this technology developed with sampling and the idea of taking things off of one recording and using it to make a new recording. And in the States, that was the birthplace of hip hop. And in the UK, that was the birthplace of what would eventually become jungle. Sort of that jungle and hip hop were simultaneous parallel cousins in that sense. So there is a lot of overlap, and when they can meet in the middle, I think it's very cool. The G Funk sound is something that there's a couple records I really like that involve that. I know 4 a.m. Cruise High Times, I think, has like that, that G Funk whistle synth in it, and um has a slower portion and then drops into the jungle beat. And I think that's a great track. And of course, the Lemon D track is iconic in its own right. Um, but I hope to see some of that come through in your new work as well. That would be a really cool sound for you to explore.
A current example of me actually doing that would be the remix I did of my own track "Run the Tunes," which was I believe I released that one last year. Like my time frame's been a little like crossed up recently because I've been on such a long hiatus with life and such. But anyways, like that was definitely one of those tracks where I implemented that style, that slow down, and just kind of like, and also like a lot of the more traditional like jungle like sound production all kind of in the same track. Like that was one where I really kind of like revisited it, was like I could do much more with this than when I first did it. And that's basically
Hmm.
what I did was I just kind of took it to another dimension from the original production, gave it that
Yeah.
slow down at the end with the mini moog whistle and like everything kind of like just yeah. I would say like in my more recent productions I was really proud of that one. And also another more recent production I was really proud of was Up in the Sky. Like I was really happy with the way that one turned out sonically. And it's almost been like it turned out so well. Like I'm trying to figure out how do I do it again. It's like it almost felt like a fluke
Yeah.
as to how well everything was balanced, turned out. Like I always try to like have a standardized approach in like my levels and everything, but something about that track it just hit exactly where I wanted it, and it's just like, dang, like how do I do this again?
I know that feeling exactly. That made me smile because I feel like a lot of my time is spent trying to just recreate something I did earlier. Never mind recreate someone else's work and find sort of that sweet spot that I was able to hit on one track and do it again. But it never seems to come out right. But it does come out with new sounds, and I am appreciative of that and the journey. And I like hearing about everyone else's journey. So thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge. I mean, wow, there's a lot there, and most people that I'm going to talk to on the show won't be as knee deep in the technical history of where this music comes from. So it's a really cool perspective for you to share with us. And before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to put out in the world? You got any projects coming up that people can check out or anywhere they should go to find more from you?
Yeah, we are. I'm in collaboration with ODJ Pertka right now on his label. We're doing a remix track, very influenced by The Matrix, and So one of the things that didn't get a chance to talk about yet, that I'll kind of talk about here, is I actually have one of the original machines that was used in scoring The Matrix, and I actually have a video of that on my YouTube channel. Like very kind of like nonchalantly, like these were sounds that were used in the production of that movie. So I've been actually taking some of those sounds from that exact machine, putting it into the track, and we're basically making this like Matrix themed late 90s virus record sounding like drum and bass production. And
That is awesome.
it's been a really fun production for me. It's also been slightly intimidating. That's actually why I've been taking this hiatus, trying to upskill myself, because I'm like, I have this like really awesome piece of history that I really want to do justice to, and I want
Yeah.
this track to do it justice. And I really am thankful for his patience with me and getting this done. It's been
Mhm.
it's been a lot to like kind of like like think the way I approach things, and so I'm really excited to get it done, and I really want to come back strong with this one, and I'm really excited about it.
I'm very excited for that as well. The Matrix is one of my favorite movies, and in particular, the score and the sound design in that movie is influential to me. So I did watch that video that you made recently of you going through the presets of the sounds they used in the score, and I thought that was cool on its own. Never mind that you're going to be making a virus style drum and bass track out of it. So I look forward to that, and I hope I hope to hear from that soon, and all your other works. And again, thank you. It's been a pleasure having you on and telling us everything you've got to share about this awesome gear. I hope we could have you back and learn some more. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. I look forward to another one of these podcasts. I could talk about this all day.